Okay, good evening and welcome, and thank you all for joining us. Next slide, please. So before we get into the workshop, I want to ask everyone to select your preferred language option. You need to select a language in order to fully participate in the meeting, and to do so, please select the interpretation icon from the Zoom toolbar. So Elsa will now provide these instructions on how to switch to the Spanish channel for participants joining with Spanish language preference. Elsa?
Thank you, Jessica. Bienvenidos y gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Si desea participar en esta reunión en español, seleccione el idioma en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, en esta parte. Y luego seleccione el idioma español, or Spanish. Si necesita asistencia técnica, levante la mano.
Thank you so much, Elsa. And we also have, and also thank you to Brittany Cardenas, who is interpreting on our Spanish line this evening. Next slide, please. So presentation materials are available in English and Spanish and can be found at dtsc.ca.gov/avenue-34. We have audio interpretation for Spanish through Zoom, and we also have it by phone. So if you would like to join by phone, please join the Spanish line by phone. You can call the number on your screen instead of having to go through Zoom. So closed captioning is on for this meeting, and you can move the box or you can turn them off by selecting the CC icon. And again, that's on your Zoom toolbar. Next slide, please. So to ensure that all meeting participants are able to fully participate in this workshop, we have developed the following agreements. So this is a shared space, and we ask that you be conscientious of that and courteous to your fellow meeting attendees. These are your neighbors, so be mindful of the space that you're taking up, and definitely give others the opportunity to express themselves as well. So by participating in this meeting, you do understand that this meeting is being recorded, and that by continuing in this meeting, you're agreeing to be recorded. You may be muted at any time during this meeting. And so to ensure that all meeting participants receive the same information, and especially those joining and receiving interpretation, please speak clearly and at an even pace. The Q&A feature is enabled, and you can use this feature to type your questions throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So again, good evening and welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time amongst your competing priorities to join us this evening. So the Department of Toxic Substances Control, also known as DTSC, is hosting this workshop. Tonight, we will be talking about the site mitigation process and the associated public participation activities, and using examples from the Avenue 34 project, which is located in Lincoln Heights, which is a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. We are presenting this workshop in response to comments received throughout the investigation and public comment period, and we will review the site mitigation process as a whole, and then we'll focus on major themes that we're seeing when reviewing community feedback thus far. Our goal is to provide more clarity on site characterization, cleanup implementation, and provide additional information on engagement moving forward. We hope to create an interactive experience, even though we must remain distant. My name is Jessica Swan, and I am the DTSC Public Participation Specialist. I work out of the Chatsworth Regional Office and work on several projects in the Los Angeles area. This meeting is scheduled from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Marcia, the Chatsworth Public Participation Unit Supervisor, and I will give a presentation. We hope to provide an interactive experience with this workshop, so polling and Q&A periods will be held throughout. The question and answer time will be focused on addressing questions about the presentation, If you're using the Q&A feature, you can use the like button if you have a similar question, or also to promote an existing question. In addition to myself and Marcia, we also have the following DTSC staff who will be available to respond to your questions. We have Luis Garcia, the project manager, CY Zhang, the project toxicologist, and Dan Philo, the project geologist. Please know that we are hosting this meeting from different locations, and we request that you bear with us if there are any time lags or technical issues. And we sincerely appreciate your patience and understanding and cooperation in making this a successful meeting. Next slide, please. So we want to begin the conversation tonight by talking a little bit about who DTSC is. So the graphic on the screen is a organizational structure of the California Environmental Protection Agency. DTSC is one of the 6 boards, departments, and offices under the California Environmental Protection Agency. Next slide, please. So DTSC's mission is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated lands, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. We are committed to this mission as public servants, as Californians, and as neighbors who live and work in and around the communities that we serve. While this is not a comprehensive list shown on the screen of all the programs and offices under DTSC, we can use it as a high-level overview to talk a little bit about how DTSC sets out to accomplish our mission. DTSC has 3 core programs that are revolve around the past, present, and future of toxic chemicals in the state. The Site Mitigation and Restoration Program remediates the toxic legacy of commerce in the state, from the gold rush to the semiconductor industry and beyond. The Hazardous Waste Management Program governs how toxic substances that are generated, transported, stored, and disposed of in the state. And we have California's Safer Consumer Products Program, which drives manufacturers to look for safer alternatives to toxics in their products. This program is impacting product design to protect our natural resources, to protect children, to protect vulnerable workers in all of California. In addition to these core programs, DTSC has several support programs to further promote the mission of DTSC. Next slide, please. So the graphic that we have shown here is all of the programs that contribute to project management for a site mitigation project. So we all work together to deliver on the mission to protect communities and the environment. And these support programs ensure that our investigations and cleanups are protective of human health and the environment. Next slide, please. So we begin the discussion on the site mitigation process with this roadmap that you see on your screen. The roadmap is a graphic of a voluntary cleanup agreement, or also known as VCA. We will use this roadmap throughout our presentation, as this is the agreement that is in place between DTSC and the project proponents at Avenue 34. We will go into detail about agreements in a future slide. We begin the process with site discovery, and depending on the investigation, a site may go all the way to certification and stewardship. And we will talk more about how and why this occurs. So before we move forward, I want to define a couple of terms that we will use throughout the presentation. So a project proponent is an all-encompassing term that describes a group of individuals who engage in an agreement with DTSC. An environmental consultant is a professional company that is hired to perform work under the agreement. So now I'd like to move to our first poll. So Marcia, if you can pull that up on the screen for us. Thank you so much. So our first poll is, what are you most interested in after having seen the roadmap? So this, you can have multiple choices. You don't have to, can select more than one. You can select all of them if you're interested in all of them. And so we'll give some time for folks to use the poll. And after the poll is completed, then we will share the results. So we are at 21 out of 34. So I'll give it another 10, 20 seconds for anybody else who wants to participate. I know we do have some folks calling in on the phone. All right, so let's go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, the folks are most interested in investigation this evening and the cleanup plan. So 71% for investigation and 79% of respondents are interested in the discussion around the cleanup plan. So we'll definitely take some time to review those this evening. Next slide, please. Okay, so how is a site discovered? Site discovery occurs in many different ways, but predominantly for voluntary cleanup agreements, it is when an owner or prospective landowner approaches DTSC with existing or potential contamination on a property, and with the intention of investigating the site and cleaning up any contamination that's found. A voluntary cleanup agreement, again, is one type of agreement that DTSC can have with project proponents. This agreement provides a general outline of activities that will occur under that agreement. It also provides the mechanism for DTSC oversight and a mechanism for us to recover costs from the proponent. So as long as the project proponent continues to abide by the voluntary cleanup agreement, that agreement can remain voluntary. Next slide, please. So we're moving on to the investigation phase. And so once the agreement is in place, the investigation can begin. A conceptual site model is designed the phase one environmental site assessment looks at the historical records and site uses to determine what contaminants might be found on the site and where they're likely to be found. Using this information, areas of concern are determined based on those locations, where those locations are likely, where contamination is likely to be found. We will discuss more about the areas of concern and some of the contaminants that are usually associated with different operations later in the presentation. So a report of the assessment is generated by the environmental consultant and sent to DTSC for review. So a conceptual site model guides the investigation and is updated throughout the process. The conceptual site model considers the history of the site from the phase one environmental assessment. It determines where areas of concern are likely to be found, what contaminants of concern we should be looking for, the different media such as soil or groundwater that chemicals can travel through. It determines the potential pathways for exposure for each of the different contaminants that might be found. And it also determines the potential receptors, which includes the people, birds, trees, the environment in general. So the phase one environmental assessment gives way to and feeds into the conceptual site model. So the next step in the investigation is the phase two environmental assessment. And this is where we're actually going on the site and taking samples of different areas. A work plan for sampling is designed by the environmental consultant and reviewed by DTSC. The work plan includes the areas to be sampled, the sampling methods, what is going to be sampled, the different materials and contaminants, and then the analytical method for looking at the chemicals that are found. So again, some of the mediums that might be sampled for during an investigation include soil, soil gas, groundwater, and indoor air. So we use information from the phase 1 environmental assessment to determine the types of chemicals that are likely to be found. Some chemicals that may be tested for include metals or solvents and contaminants related to the use of petroleum, as well as many others. The chemicals that are likely to be found on the site and the families of those contaminants are tested for. The results of this assessment, the phase 2 assessment, are compared to regulatory screening levels. So each chemical has its own screening level, and we will talk more about those screening levels when we discuss the risk assessment. So during our conversation on site characterization, we will also see the areas of concern in the chemicals from Avenue 34. Next slide, please. So it doesn't stop at just one sampling event. We often require a supplemental sampling investigation, also known as an SSI. And this investigation is a follow-up to the phase 2 assessment. And it's used to define the boundaries of contamination. So this is like how far down a contaminant has traveled or how wide it has spread. The trends of contamination are defined. So the source areas are found, the hotspots are located, and the boundaries of each contaminant are determined. DTSC may require one or more supplemental sampling investigations to determine the extent of any contaminant found on site. Work is done under DTSC's oversight by a certified environmental consultant. And among other things, the sampling method and the testing sites are reviewed. The investigations include a review of utility lines to determine if they could be a source of contamination or provide a route for contamination to move, also known as a preferential pathway. Next slide, please. So if an investigation finds that there is contamination on a property, we then begin the public participation activities. So we start by gathering information about the surrounding community. We use the community survey as one way to gauge public interest in a project. And some other sources may include the review of internal files, visiting the site, reviewing articles about community interest in the site. We also do research on demographic data, and we also have conversations with groups, community groups and individuals. We might also have conversations with state and local representatives, elected officials, and of course with the property owner and its representatives. So now we're going to move on to our next poll. So the question is, what is DTSC's role in the cleanup process? So the first response is determine future land use. The second response is oversight of cleanup process. And this third choice is choose the disposal facility for excavated soil. So we'll give you about a minute to respond to this question, and then we'll share the results. Okay, thank you all so much for your participation. So DTSC's role in the cleanup process is the oversight of the cleanup process. Determinations on future land use are not made by us. We make sure that the cleanup process and the investigation process are safe for human health and the environment. All right, so now I'd like to move in, next slide, please. I'd like to move into our first question and answer period. So before we begin this first question and answer time, I would like to give another reminder to select your preferred language. We all need to select our preferred language in order to fully participate. So go to your Zoom menu and select the globe icon and make your language selection. And before we begin, I will have Elsa give these instructions for our Spanish participants as well.
Antes de comenzar este primer tiempo de preguntas y respuestas, me gustaría darle otro recordatorio para seleccionar su preferencia de idioma. Todos los participantes deben de hacer una selección de idioma para participar plenamente en el taller. Jessica?
Thank you so much, Elsa. So I will, Marcia, okay, so let's start with the Q&A really quickly. So we'll start with Q&A and then raised hands, and then we will ask if our Spanish call-in line has any questions. So
we don't have any questions about the workshop so far in the Q&A feature. We've got 3 raised hands though. So we'll start with Michael Henry Hayden. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, thank you.
Hi, so Ms. Swan, you just said in your presentation that one of the important parts of the site investigation is determining the extent of the contamination by determining the boundaries of contamination. We are aware that you have not done that at this site because they've only tested to the boundaries of the property, not to the boundaries of the contamination. And even at the boundaries of the property, contamination is still at levels above residential safety standards, which indicates that the contamination likely travels off-site. And additionally, DTSC has supported that assumption by concluding that neighboring residents and workers are subject to vapor intrusion exposure in their homes and businesses. Will DTSC determine the boundaries of the contamination that has been found at this property by testing off-site, as all of our elected officials, the public, and DTSC's own guidelines require?
Thank you so much for your question. So I think there's 2 parts to this question, and I'm going to call on different folks to answer it. I think so. I think Luis, maybe you can talk about the site characterization and how we have determined the extent to contamination. And then going into the risk assessment as far as the VI exposure to folks, you know, the statement that there's VI exposure, we can talk about that with CY. So Luis, if you'd like to take the first half.
Yeah, I think we provided a similar response in our response to comments, where we say that we mentioned that the concentrations they not only decrease significantly as you move away from their respective source, but also as far as being a VI risk. Something else that was also brought up previously was like sewer lines and such, and we've already mentioned that determination that we don't believe that the community members or neighboring residents are at risk for any vapor intrusion. That VI risk was in relation to the excavation work that would take place at the site itself. So I believe the project proponent has submitted the RDIP, where they mentioned their commitment to abide by AQMD rules. There's several, the 1466, the 1166. You know that there currently there's no risk to the neighboring community.
Okay, so thank you so much, Luis. So just to recap, the VI risk that was discussed in the removal, the raw, was in relationship to when cleanup starts and the potential for a pathway existing at that time. And just for everyone's clarity, an RDIP is the remedial design implementation plan, and we will go over that in more detail in a later on in the presentation. CY, if you want to jump in, if you want to add anything about the VI exposure, or if you think Luis covered it, I think he did a great job. So,
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, quickly before CY answers that question, we have a question in the Q&A asking people to define abbreviation. So anyone speaking on DTSC's behalf, please make sure that you speak out the entire acronym. Thank you.
Okay, first, yeah. Actually, that's a good point. So some of you see my title is hero psychologist. Doesn't mean I'm a hero. Okay, it stands for Human and Ecological Risk Office. In fact, I'm not a hero. Okay, in the traditional sense. But I've been with this hero and the department for 15 years. And thanks, Mr. Hayden. I think your question is a good one. But let me clarify. Okay, so when you say I believe you refer to some of the soil vapor concentration at the soil vapor probes that's near the boundary, direct property boundary, that exceed what we actually, I think Jessica mentioned, it's referred as regulatory screening level. So a clarification is, okay, the screening level, they are generic, they are derived based on very conservative assumption, and they are intended to be used for initial screening purpose, and they are not de facto safe standard or cleanup standard. And as we get into the investigation and characterization mode, we collect more site data and understand, the source area and how the contaminant may transport their fate and transport process. And we start shift from the screening level and then start to look at all these site-specific consideration and certainly exceedance of the screening level warrant further evaluation. And that's, I think later on, I think especially Marcia, when they get into later step, we can elaborate a little bit more. But I just want to reemphasize, we understand, there may be differences in the opinion on how the existing data means and when we may need to collect additional data during this cleanup process. And our job is to make sure, the data we collected, we evaluate properly according to our guidance and the best available science. And I'll be happy to answer, more questions if this is not, clearly direct answer all your concern. Okay, thanks.
thank you, CY.
Okay, we have another question from someone on the Zoom called FS. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I have a couple of comments now, actually, but the first question would be, in your own words, can you tell us what the community feedback on this project is? Given that you had supposed outreach, I'd like to know what the community feedback was regarding this project. Second of all, just reiterating what was just stated, that there is different opinions regarding the data collected and how it should be implemented. It's really just a shock that objective data can become subjective. I don't know how you guys managed to do that. But I don't think that it's too far-fetched to want to test outside the boundaries, considering that there are LA Times articles and lawsuits that have been uncovered regarding over 200 barrels of toxic chemicals buried in this site. I just don't think there's due diligence being conducted here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment, and I will address the first part of it, which was the question regarding the data that we collected from community. We do have the survey. We will be developing a community profile, and that will be available to public, as well as we have consolidated all of the responses, all of the comments that we received during the public comment period. And those are available on the Enviro store. We'll talk more about that later. But I think the information that you're looking for will be in the community profile, where it will define what happened in the community survey, as well as what we've found through our engagement thus far.
I understand. I'm so sorry. I wasn't asking where I can find it. I'd like to know, because I know you're the community liaison. From what you heard from the community, what was the feedback? Was it positive or negative? Does the community support this project or not?
I mean, it depends on who you're asking, right? So I think that all will be captured in the community profile, and I will get that over to you and we can discuss it. Thank you so much for your comment.
I did mark one of the questions from the Q&A feature answered. It was about if there is published and accessible list of outreach. So Jessica just responded to that, and I'm marking that answered. There is a community profile, and all of the outreach for the project has been documented. So we'll go to our next raised hand. Actually, let me check with Brittany. Brittany, are there any questions on the Spanish channel or the call-in line? Okay, sounds like there are none. So we'll go to our next raised hand, Sarah Clendering. I'm having trouble unmuting you, Sarah. I think we might have different versions of Zoom. Let's see. I'm going to try to promote you as a panelist, and then I'll move you back to the attendee to see if that will work. There it goes. Sarah, are you with us? Oh, you're connecting. Just give it 1 second. Sarah? I can't hear you. Oh, you had your hand raised. Thanks, Brittany. That's Brittany. Okay. You see Sarah?
I can see her. I saw her in the panelist list. I think we can move on. We have several other questions, and then if she comes back on the line, she can raise her hand again. I don't
Okay.
see.
Okay. AJ, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to address kind of what the first and second person had said. So I just don't understand how you have done no testing. Like in you said, what was it? You said that you look at areas of concern that are determined, right? Okay, so if there's areas that have been concerned by the community, like that were shown in the LA Times or back in like 82 or whatever, I don't understand how you haven't even acknowledged that has even happened or occurred at any of these meetings. You've never said anything about it, acknowledged it or anything, and how that cannot be a concern and anything anything that you've touched on. And then the other thing that I wanted to know about is you said the work is done under DTSC's oversight by a certified environmental consultant. And who would that certified environmental consultant be?
Sure. Thank you for both of your questions. So the quick one, there are many certified environmental consultants throughout the state of California, but for this particular project, it is California Environmental. For the regarding the historical dumping of barrels, we did address that in the response to comments that was sent out and is available on the EnviroStore page. And so as we were made aware of the dumping, we conducted inquiries into determining the location of the disposal. We do not have the information as to the exact location of the dumping area. However, DTSC has concluded that the data collected to date is sufficient to characterize the site for both evaluating the potential risk to human health and for the purposes of developing a cleanup plan.
Right. I just don't understand how you guys couldn't like find that information. Like we didn't know where it was dumped. Like, shouldn't this be like part of public record? Would be one thing I would like respond to that. And the other thing that, do you have the certified, what was it? The certified environmental consultants. You have that, all that information, because I do know that Jay Stark, that's part of this project, is part of like Heal the Bay and a lot of different groups that do environmentally positive things. So I'm kind of I just want to like double check and make sure there's no like conflict of interest. You know what I mean?
So what are you requesting in regards to the environmental consultant?
Oh, if we can find out like the, more information about the certified environmental consultant, like where would we find that information?
If you send
that
me
information is it's in the work plans and the documents themselves that are up on the EnviroStore site, Jessica.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
And I'm sorry, what? Okay. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay, so let's see. Some of the questions are about some of what's going to come up in the future in our discussion about site characterization and the cleanup plan. So I'll save those. For next Q&A period. And I'm gonna look for some more that are related to this segment. In the meantime, our next hand raised is Dr. Tom Williams. So if you want to go ahead and unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighbor Council, Land Use and Planning Committee, but also I was a construction management for the Red Line Phase 1. So I've dealt with a lot of hazmat, 40 underground tanks, and a lot of contaminated soil. So far that I've seen the excavation process, the documentation as to where the materials are, and the geological context has not been provided. There, as far as evidence for the locations, get aerial photographs from a company called Lightbox or EDR. The Department of City Planning can tell you where it is. I can send you a note. So get it done right before you start excavating it. Then for excavation, there's a kind of total acceptance that vapors will go everywhere. No, we were in downtown LA and we had to control the H2S and the hydrocarbon vapors, and it can be done. And that was 40 years ago. Come on, it has developed. There are methods, and we need to see them inputted to the Avenue 34. So my basic question is, how are you going to deal with the vapors going out and controlling them, not only in the excavation, but in the excavation process, the loading of the trucks and the trucks themselves? So keep focused on Avenue 34 and give us more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. I think just to follow up that DTSC will be providing a safe cleanup. And I think the evaluation of, current residents and all the other potential receptors that we reviewed during the risk assessment, those are evaluated to ensure that we can have a comprehensive and clean and safe cleanup. So thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Our next, we do have a question related to identifying potential constituents of concern from our colleague at the Department of Public Health. So Charlene Williams, Charlene Contreras, can DTSC confirm with confidence, 100% confidence, that all potential constituents of concern associated with the property have identified and will be evaluated? I think we confirmed that they were evaluated. So I'll ask one of our project team to respond.
Can you hear me, Jessica?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So for the site investigations, we've there's been several rounds of sampling that has taken place at the site. From my understanding, we had approximately 50 soil gas samples in total, to approximately 250 soil samples. We have groundwater monitoring data. As far as characterization goes, the site has been characterized enough to move on to, for the development of a cleanup plan. And that's exactly what we're doing. We want to remove be expeditious in removing these contaminants on the site.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Luis.
Okay. I'm going to look for other questions about material Jessica covered. In the meantime, Melanie Belomo, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I live on Avenue 32. I have 3 young children. I had some questions, but that's just to give some context of my concern. I am confused why, call me crazy, but it seems like when there is a good question to ask, that it doesn't want to be answered in any kind of transparent manner. And I have a few questions here. So I'm wondering why, like, are you being directed not to answer our questions directly, such as what caller FS brought up? She was directed to a website, but we all know the answer because most of the people on this call read through all the responses, read through all the public comment. And we know that I think 100%, I'll check my numbers, I think 100% of the respondents showed grave concern. So I don't understand why we're not talking about that in a transparent manner. Like it's so strange to watch you all dodge this question when we all know what the answer is. Is there a reason why you don't want to speak that publicly? Also, is there a reason why every time somebody brings up the toxic waste at Avenue 34 from the 80s, that question is also completely ignored? Can someone just like acknowledge, yes, we know that has happened and was found on the site. Yes, we realize that our report doesn't address that at all. Yes, it's something that needs to be done. Like, can someone just say that? Like, if you could just say these things to breed some kind of trust with the community that you haven't been able to breed any so far. Also, I know that I think CY was saying that there is a difference of opinion. And I do find it interesting that anyone that is currently working for DTSC, all of their opinions seem to line up. But when you look at previous DTSC, either employees or people who work closely with the health department or environmental specialists, their opinion seems to be the opposite. And I find that that's interesting, that that's pretty consistent across the board. And, you know, I'll just direct you to the letters that were sent by Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Coalition, you know, with all of the signatures that were on there and all of the concerns. I know you've all read that, so that's what I'm referring to. I also want you to address the fact that this agreement is made between DTSC and the developer. And I do think we should start referring to this as the developer and not the term that was used earlier. And not with the community directly. Like, why aren't we more a part of the agreement? Because the developer is only making money off of this scenario. We're the ones living with the after effects. So I don't know why we're removed from this agreement and why our opinion really just comes up in these like public comment periods, and then our questions and our concerns are kind of like brushed under the rug. So I don't know, a lot of concerns here, but if someone could just directly answer our questions and acknowledge our concerns, we would be so appreciative to know that maybe you're hearing us. Again, we all read the responses. We all know the community is extremely concerned about our health and safety moving forward. That is not a secret. So I'd like us to stop acting, you know, like this is unknown information. Thank you. Sorry, buddies.
Thank you so much for your comment, Melanie. It was not my intention at all to brush anything under the rug in regards to community sentiment. I think that having the full picture available would be a better way to proceed with that discussion, and that's not where we're at this evening. And so I think that, you know, and I'm willing to even come to the Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council and give a presentation on the community profile when that's completed. So I don't have a problem with speaking to life anything that's come out of our public process so far. And all of our process has been public thus far. And in regards to the contamination on the site, the response that we provided in the response to comments is an accurate statement. It defines what we've done thus far and how we consider the site to be characterized based on the fact that the site has been tested, and the information based on that does not show contaminants coming in from an offsite source. So I appreciate all of your comments.
But you're still
we will
doing it. Like, you're still doing exactly what I said you guys are doing. Why? Like, are you being told by your boss not to honestly and earnestly answer our questions? Like, what is happening? Are we being just gaslit into oblivion? Like, you did the exact same thing that you've been doing this entire, like, why hold these meetings? I don't understand what is happening. I think there's something to it.
Okay, Melly, maybe you and I can have a discussion offline about how we can proceed with engagement moving forward, and maybe we can set that aside as a different topic so that we can have this discussion going forward. We can include whoever needs to be included in that conversation. I'm open to that as well. So, and I apologize if that's how you're feeling, but that's not our intention at all. Thank you so much.
Okay. We're going to take the next raised hand. Oh no, we've got a question in the Q&A feature about confirmation of the soil report submitted by the developer to the LA City Department of Building and Safety addressing soil contamination. So I'm wondering if someone on the project team can refer to this, to the most recent soil sampling report.
What's the timestamp on that, Marcia?
It looks like
Can you throw it over and answered, and then that way it might be easier?
I did.
Okay.
I
Oh,
did.
that's why.
Yeah, it should be in the answered segment. But we're getting a lot of input, so I'm trying to make sure we're focused on the segments that we're covering. I'll keep working on that and allow.
So I have it. So at 6:46, and this is
Thank
to my
you.
project team, can you confirm if the soil report submitted by the developer to the LA City Department of Building and Safety addresses the soil contamination? I don't want to make any assumptions here, but I'm not particularly sure what this is in reference to. Luis, do you have any?
No, I was going to say, I'm not sure. Dan, do you recognize what?
So I would be assuming.
Okay.
I'm not sure which report specifically they're talking about, because I don't know what's been submitted to the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. So to our anonymous attendee, if you can provide some more clarification around your question on like what soil report, and again, like Dan's saying, we don't necessarily know everything that's submitted to Building and Safety. So if we can get more clarification on which particular report you're discussing, we can answer that question. Go ahead, Marcia.
Thanks. Sarah shared that she is back and on the phone, so I'm going to go to her and then take the hands that I see raised in order. Okay.
Hey, Jessica, can you hear me? Can everybody
Yeah,
hear
I
me?
can. Thank you. I'm glad you got that figured out.
Thank you guys for setting up this meeting. It's been, so many meetings, right? President of Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council. The community has been fighting for a seat at the table regarding this project for years now. And I personally have dedicated all of my time in researching the history of these properties. And it's, let's see. I could just crack some nuts here. you know, when Ed Reyes, there was an ordinance for the cast for this parcel, for the Welch's property and the Avenue 34 property to be exempted from the cast by Ed Reyes because of proximity to the Heritage Square Gold Line to like have increased densities. Like the city had already predetermined in 2009 which parcels they were going to be building these things on. And the other one was at Nila Plaza. So, you know, this has been going on for so long. And it's been, you know, the sad thing is like, you know, you guys, DTSC was started after the fact, started in like 1991 or whatever. And everything on this property happened before DTSC existed. And yeah, so when you say that like everything's been revealed, for instance, the usage of this property, it's like, I know everything that's ever happened on these sites. And the fact that a key thing was omitted from the environmental report, it's that this whole Avenue 34 parcel was purchased by East Northeast Redevelopment Corporation through the Model Cities program in 1971. Okay, and they built these things. And they built the big warehouse and they finished up in 1980. Houses were torn down, blah, 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 blah. But before that, it was where Cannon Electric had its plating and stuff. Now, none of that was ever like, you know, you guys didn't mention it. But yeah, on East Northeast Redevelopment Corp, Gloria Molina was on the board, right? So, and when they built the big warehouse and all that, they graded and moved over 1 million cubic feet of earth. They knew it was toxic. The city has known this as toxic forever. And when the 254 barrels of toxic waste were discovered, that was actually a tenant, a business in the East Northeast Redevelopment Corp building that Gloria Molina is on the board for. And at that same time, yeah, Barry Groveman and the Toxic Waste Strike Force and the city attorney and the county Department of Health prosecuted this guy. But there's no record of that lawsuit. And the city just didn't even remember that ever happened. And GTSC never knew about it either. It's just, there's just like such a lineage of information being omitted here. Gloria Molina, the city, everybody's known this site is so toxic. They've been trying to offload it. They sold it to a private person. It was supposed to be like an industrial compound for revitalizing a community of color, to bring economic prosperity to a marginalized community, because this thing was supposed to initially be at the jail. It was supposed to make a factory for the brown people of Lincoln Heights. Now that federally funded property has been sold to a developer, RCAP. Yeah, under the guise of affordable housing, all that stuff. But in any case, CPR. Oh yeah, the way that I found out about the Welch's thing getting paved was, you know, I'm a nerd, so I'd go and look up the CPRA request with the city clerk, and I saw like an engineering company was like, please give me any documents the city has on hand of any history of dumping or chemicals or anything on the property. City replied, oh, we have no history. And I don't know if you guys were the ones that did that PRA, or if it was Cyril Welch, or if it was Pinion Group. But I mean, if the city doesn't have documents because they destroyed them in 2016. They didn't keep them. There's so many toxic sites like the platers that blew up on Workman Street or Sitchell back in the 80s. That's not even on EnviroStore. It's like not even, you know, they're just deleted. They were never even properly remediated. And I just don't want to take too much time, but yeah, everyone's had like really specific queue conditions for this site. The students and the faculty, everybody at the schools, they were supposed to be the priority, and they were never even communicated with. But the whole thing is like, I'm not saying DTSC is a joke or any of that. You guys, you know, you test the soil, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't know the history, like if you don't look at the substructure maps and see that there were multiple dry cleaners all interconnected there, where they correspond with the Welch's, it's like, you guys, it's like we'll appreciate like the show, but you're the state, you're protecting the city's interest. This is a health, this is life or death for our community. This is a health thing. It's like, it ain't, you know, you just have to understand like
yeah, it's part of the protocol. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But it's that don't condescend to the people. The people are the experts here because we live here and we know the history. And it's just, I know that you're scientists and I could stick a beaker in the dirt and say, oh, this is clean. But,
Sure.
you know, it's 50 feet of infill and it's a liquefaction source, you know, and you guys didn't even know there was
Sarah,
a through there.
I
So
really appreciate you sharing all of your institutional knowledge. A lot of it has gone into our work here. And I do have to keep the program moving. So we're going to stop Q&A for this segment, and we're gonna move on to the next segment. Apologies to those whose questions weren't answered. We're doing our best to get around to as many folks as we can. And hopefully we'll be able to share more with you. But, you know, Jessica and the project team have been doing their best to respond to as many of your questions as we can, and they'll continue to be as responsive as they can. All right. Thank you so much. Can we please move to the next slide? Okay. So the next step in our process is site characterization. Once DTSC determines that the investigations are sufficient to outline the extent of contamination, the site is considered characterized. So please move to the next slide. This slide shows the characterized site of Avenue 34. It shows which chemicals are in which locations and to what extent they are found. And when we say extent, we mean to the width and the depth that the chemicals are present, as well as how much of the chemical is present. So this determination is made after reviews by our subject matter experts, some of which you've met tonight, like our toxicologist, geologist, and our project manager, who may be a scientist or an engineer. The site characterization report, one of many reports, summarizes these results in the of the investigations. And, you know, as they mentioned, there are often more than one. The investigation activities that took place at Avenue 34 were in several different media. So by media, we're talking about soil gas. And when we talk about soil gas, it's like air and the different vapors that are that is in between the little particles of soil and groundwater, which as many of us here know is separate from our drinking water. The chemicals that we sampled for were total petroleum hydrocarbons. That was because of the use of gasoline and that it was stored there on the site. We also sampled for volatile organic compounds. You'll hear about those called PCE and TCE. What they are solvents. They're used to clean industrial equipment and in dry cleaning. Metals were sampled on the site because of electronics assembly, unknown soil on the site, which many of us have in our yards because we garden, and you know we may get soil from Home Depot or somewhere else like that. But it's very common to have unknown soil on a property, and a machine shop that operated on the site. So at this point, the conceptual site model is updated and describes the locations of contamination. Excuse me. It describes the locations where the contaminate. Give me 2 seconds. I need to blow my nose. I'm sorry. Allergies are getting to me. Okay, we're at the conceptual site model. The conceptual site model being updated that identified the locations of contamination, and it also, very importantly, identifies the specific exposure pathways that are used in the risk assessment. So DTSC for this risk assessment follows the US EPA and California risk assessment guidance. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty.
Marcia, let me know if you need me to pick it up.
Give me 2 seconds. My camera's, it's telling me I don't have bandwidth. So apologies, everyone. I'm trying to sort it out. Okay. All right.
I think it's okay to proceed
All
without
right.
a camera.
Okay. Okay, I got it back online. So, and I didn't need it anyway, because we are at our next poll. So my question for you all tonight is, how many sampling events does it take for a site to be characterized? Jessica, if you can share that, let me know. If you can't, I can do it. Everything's working again. Thanks. Let's go ahead and close it. It looks like everyone knows the answer here. So, do you want me to close it? Okay. Thank you. So that's correct. So the question were, how many sampling events does it take to characterize the site? 1, 3, 8, or as many as necessary to determine the extent of contamination. And that's correct. That's what we do for every project at DTSC. So next slide, please. So once the site is characterized, we can oversee the development of a cleanup plan. The cleanup and risk assessment. So, the risk assessment and the cleanup plan is developed when the risk assessment shows that there's unacceptable risk potentially to human health and the environment from the contamination on the site. So what the cleanup plan does is evaluate the different possible options that will effectively address that contamination, with goals that are tailored to address the contamination at the site for the future land use and the specific conditions of the site. So the conditions of the site mean what kind of soil layers are present, what kind of buildings are there, and all the other different kind of environmental conditions there. There are several different kinds of cleanup plans. The one for Avenue 34 is a common one called a removal action work plan. Sometimes often you'll hear it called a RAW. It applies to cleanups that are projected to cost less than $2 million and are relatively straightforward. So regardless of the plan that we use, the thoroughness of an investigation, cleanup, and post-remediation stewardship must be protective of human health and the environment. The contaminants at Avenue 34 are commonly known industrial chemicals, and the cleanup methods that are in the raw are very standard for sites like this all over California. They focus on cleaning up the contaminants at their highest levels of concentration first, and they address the rest of them as well. So like, for example, soil vapor extraction wells will be placed on the site, and they'll be placed at the locations where the highest concentration of volatile organic chemicals are found. So when DTSC deems cleanup plan is sufficient, and that the wells are placed in those areas, but they also address an entire radius of the chemical. So when DTSC deems that a draft plan is sufficient, addressing the contamination found at the site, put it forward for public comment. This is a process that Avenue 34 has been through recently. During the comment period, we accept comments. We don't hold a meeting for every project. We did for this one, and we respond to the comments that we get in a response to comment document. So comment period timeframes are outlined in the California Health and Safety Code, and community input can change the course of a project at any point. During the survey, during the community survey period, we learn about the different ways that communities need to get their information in. We learn about the different languages. Some of the community or based organizations that are present, like Jessica has been attending neighborhood council meetings. She learned about that during the community survey period. It can also change, community input can also change the course of a project after a community, and that's not a public comment period. It can change after a comment period, like for Avenue 34, just recently, DTSC required the developer to redirect their haul routes. I think I saw a question about the haul routes earlier. We directed the developer to redirect the haul routes for trucks loaded with contaminated soil that are headed to licensed disposal facilities based on community input. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're talking about the pre-implementation stage of the project. Remedy design will vary from site to site depending on those conditions. So this map shows the planned SVE, the SV soil vapor extraction plan from the remedy design. You can see the location for the extraction wells and the monitoring locations. Several plans, documents, and permits are completed between the cleanup plan approval and the implementation. If the plan, if DTSC finds the plan inadequate, revisions or any other agency that that needs to give permission of some kind to the cleanup project, the revisions will be made until they're sufficient. So some of the required permits are, for example, you need a grading permit from the city of LA. If you want to drill down to groundwater, you need permission from the water board. If your project has any kind of street encroachment, you need to take it up with the Department of Transportation. Transportation routes, as we just discussed, may be submitted with the design or separately. There's a health and safety plan, a community air monitoring plan that follows air quality monitoring district requirements. There's a soil management plan that's developed for each site to protect the workers and surrounding communities during the implementation. And all workers are expected to follow the Occupational Safety and Health Administration requirements. All these plans are available for the public and may be changed during the implementation if needed to protect public health and the environment. Any changes that are made are also documented. Next slide, please. We just got a couple more. We're almost done. Then we'll move to questions. Implementation of the actual project. So when all those documents are completed, the permits are acquired, cleanup can start. Throughout the cleanup, work notices are posted, and if there's a project email list, people share those. People receive those as well. DTSC staff visit the site to ensure that the plans are being followed. That's usually the health and safety plan and the dust monitoring plan. Sampling and monitoring is also done periodically to make sure that the cleanup methods are working effectively. In the case of Avenue 34, it's important to differentiate here between the development plan and project and the cleanup plan and project under DTSC oversight. We oversee the cleanup. That's the only portion of the work that takes place at this property that we are directly involved in. So, for example, when we talk about excavation is part of that development plan. There's also excavation that's part of our cleanup plan. So we oversee excavation to the extent that contamination has been found and do confirmation sampling to ensure that the accuracy of that that contamination, the depth and width has been addressed by the excavation. All right, so we're going to do another poll. And I'm going to ask you how we know our cleanup process was effective. All right. All right. It's similar to the last one. I feel like everyone knows the answer, but I'll give you all a few more moments. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the poll here. Share our results. So how do we know that our cleanup is effective? That's right, confirmation sampling. We can't just, see people, see who's working there and what's taking place physically. We need to know on a very, very microscopic level if we're being effective. Next slide, please. All right, so we have reached the end of the journey of our site mitigation process roadmap. So this is where certification and stewardship come into play. So verify our cleanup. Confirmation sampling is done when we verify the cleanup to make sure the goals are met. For Avenue 34, it's going to include soil testing and soil vapor testing, as well as monitoring of soil vapor and groundwater. There's also a post-cleanup risk assessment that's required to confirm that the condition of the site is protective of human health and the environment. That is all documented in a completion report. That completion report is called a removal action completion report, also known as a RACER. The RACER confirms that everything as stated in the RAW was completed, and the documents, so that means soil vapor extraction, this project, excavation, and it documents any activities that needed to happen to ensure the protection of human health and the environment. DTSC then writes an approval letter and determines the land use. So there are two categories of land use. One is unrestricted, and that is generally unrestricted for residential use. So that means that anyone could live at the site. The other is restricted, and there are a variety of types of those restrictions. It could be industrial use, like for a factory. It could be recreational use, like for a park. So based on that restriction, there's stewardship involved. There could be a land use covenant, groundwater monitoring, soil vapor monitoring, and for Avenue 34, quarterly groundwater monitoring for 2 years following cleanup is part of the plan. And then after those 2 years, it will be assessed on whether more monitoring needs to continue. There also could be an operations and maintenance work plan that ensures that a long-term remedy like a cap is working, and that type of remedy always include that type of stewardship always includes financial assurance. Next slide, please. So we've come to our next Q&A segment, and we'll invite questions again.
Thank you, Marcia. So I'm going to take the first hand raised right now, which is Joel Kayak, and then the next one is Stacy.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Hey. Before I begin, I just want to be sure, Marcia mentioned quite some time ago, California Environmental is the environmental consultants that you're speaking of as far as test results, yes? Hello?
So California Environmental is the current environmental consultant. There
Okay, great.
was an
That-
environment. Okay.
I just wanted to be sure of that. So my question is for all of you, but it's primarily for CY. Back in June 17th of 2021 is when the developers first shared their results for the site, their environmental testing results, which was being done at the time by a company called Fulcrum Resources, a different environmental consultant. That those results showed an incredibly high contamination in soil gases. PCE, which you had mentioned, was at 18,000 times above residential safety limit. Let me say it one more time, 18,000 times above the residential safety limits. The next day, the developers hired a new environmental consultant company, California Environmental, who performed the soil and groundwater tests on the property without clearing their testing activities with DTSC. Of course, you know that because you work for this organization. So these tests that they took were done without let's just be clear that those tests were done without properly clearing them with DTSC. They then submit their testing results in July, and they discovered that the soil contaminants are at a higher level than what the Fulcrum tests had suggested. So a few weeks after that, the DTSC geologist, Maya Bachman, she writes an internal letter disputing Fulcrum and California Environmental's conclusions of the sampling methods. And she argues that too few samples were taken and there's inconsistent methodology. She recommends that their conclusions about health and safety need to be done with a standalone assessment. And in a separate letter, CY says, and I'm going to quote him here, that HERO recommends conducting additional site characterization and preparing a robust conceptual site model based on historical operations, investigation results, and current and planned site uses. And this is the most important part, followed by a comprehensive health risk assessment on all contaminated media and complete exposure pathways associated with the receptors. This, as of now, there has been no comprehensive health risk assessment that has been conducted. This has been talked about on December 7th. Our US Representative Jimmy Gomez and our County Supervisor Hilda Solis met with the US, the United States EPA, and the EPA wrote a letter to you stating that they share the neighborhood's concerns that the DTSC investigation was not thorough enough because they don't for several reasons, but primarily for offsite testing. So I'd like to hear from CY and have him explain to us why his internal letter that he wrote seems to go against what the final procedure was for this, or lack thereof, and how I would assume he disagrees with the EPA. And I'm wondering if that's part of this idea that somehow scientific fact is interpreted or can be subjective. So I'd like to hear from CY regarding that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the detailed question. Let me first clarify. Okay, when I acknowledge that there are differences in opinion, I didn't mean that the data, data itself, everybody see the same thing, all right? But the guidance, okay, we follow, okay, tell us particular way of following the guidance, as I mentioned, the best available size. So I just want to clarify that. It doesn't mean I'm always right. Okay, I'm just following the guidance that's actually being applied to all the DTSC sites throughout California. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to emphasize. We treat this site the same as any other sites. Like for example, like for lead, we use the same cleanup standard that's used for X site. Some of you know. that's, that's a site in Los Angeles. Okay, but go back to your specific question about the previous comment I wrote. At that time, I was looking at, okay, the data that was presented. And I apologize because I have to go back to see exactly at that point what data we had. All right, and then I know California Environmental later on collect additional data. And regardless of who the consultants are, all the data were put in this removal action work plan. And they did do a risk assessment using the worst case scenario, meaning they took the highest concentration in soil vapor, and calculate the risk, based on, again, the guidance, the soil vapor. Some of you familiar there.
I understand what you're saying, CY. I'm not really concerned with I was presenting something I was presenting context for my question. What I want to know is, you disagree with what the EPA is saying about this site, correct? The US EPA.
No,
your
no,
opinion of the site
I
is different than theirs.
Okay.
Yes or no?
I'm not aware of what, I was not involved. I'm just a technical staff supporting to the project team. So I don't know what EPA said. I'm just working with DTAC project team. So I apologize. I don't have that information that I can give you a direct answer.
Thank you so much, CY, for your response. So we are going to move to the next raised hand, which is Stacy.
Actually, I think
Go
Javier, yeah.
All right.
Jessica Javier.
Sorry, hold on just one moment.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Javier Hinojosa. I'm the branch chief for the Chatsworth branch. I'm relatively new to the project over just the last 2 months, but I've been with the department for over 33 years and been in site cleanup and remediation for 30 of those years, and at least 22 years in supervision and management of the program. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate what our process is. As we evaluate investigations, oftentimes we do get information of investigations that are conducted without our oversight, and then there are investigations conducted under our oversight, and sometimes there is variability in results, right? And but the key here is, do we have enough information to move forward for a cleanup, right? And I think while there was variability in the results of the different sampling events, and it could have been because of the way that the samples were collected, it could have been seasonal variability and laboratory variability, which exist in these concentrations that are very small concentrations, but as the gentleman, Joel, indicated, these were really high concentrations. Both of them were really high concentrations. So there's no doubt that this site requires cleanup, right? So, it was clear for the team's benefit that, regardless of the risk assessment, there was sufficient information to move forward to require the project proponent or the developer to do a cleanup. And that cleanup is laid out in the removal action work plan and in greater detail in the remedial design implementation plan that has been also made publicly available for those interested in those types of details. But I think that's the key. It's not uncommon from consultant to consultant, day to day, to collect similar types of sampling and get variability. There's even variability, orders of magnitude, which means you can have a 10 one day and 100 another day and 1,000 another day. But the key here is that all the numbers determine that a removal action is required. So if your screening level risk assessment that was conducted says further action, a site specific, detailed risk assessment that may consider additional manipulation of the data and statistical analysis is not going to yield the different results. The fact is that there's been a release. It's significantly elevated. It's not consistent with the proposed land use, and it requires cleanup. And that cleanup that's spelled out in the plan is, first of all, soil excavation, and then followed by vapor extraction. And then also, I want to say, to some of the other questions that, this is the initial plan, but the plan can still be adjusted. Now, there's a proposal for a certain number of, for a pilot study first to determine the extent that the system is going to work, and then is going to be expanded. And if the results change, that it's not being effective, then we may do additional cleanup as well. But the goal here is clearly set at a very high standard, which is residential land use on the property, and also for protection of the neighboring properties, right? So I think that's the important thing to focus on, and again, recognize that in the environmental analysis, there is going to be variability.
Thank you so much, Javier. And so now I will, thank you so much for patiently waiting, Stacy. We'll go ahead and please express your comment at this time.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
All right, this is Stacy Dawson Stearns. I've been following this for as long as it's been going on, and I just want to speak out to my comrades who are sitting on this call, who've done more work and more research at a higher level than any office that's been associated with this, the one we're speaking to included. I'm absolutely shocked. Actually, I'm not, because this has been going on so long, but I have some strong questions for you. And I just want to say that the fact that your names are blacked out, the fact that like the screen is a blank Q&A unless you're talking, the amount of gaslighting and dismissal that's going on from this body is disgraceful, and it's disrespectful. And so I'm going to start out with my questions for you. The first question is, would you move in with a baby across the street from this site knowing what you know? Would you? Because if the answer is no, then you guys aren't doing your jobs. You've got an entire community that has been spending endless hours of work unpaid, while you and the Planning Commission and our friends at Pinion and their various LLCs and the Lincoln Heights Industrial Bid and Urban Strategies. Okay, we all know the deal. And Gil Cedillo, we know the deal. We've watched this thing be given TOC status. We've watched it be moved through by city government. We've watched the community get plowed over. And y'all are just acting like people are flies buzzing around your head. You are acting as though the EPA is some frivolous thing that you don't have to be aware of. You're literally qualifying your answers by saying that you're not aware of things because you're new to the project. And then you're listening to community members and stakeholders who are very familiar with this. So second question as to if you're going to be like Melanie and bring your baby there, because she doesn't have a choice, right? She doesn't have a choice. You heard her baby crying. Patricia Camacho doesn't have a choice. You guys have a choice, though. You can decide if you're going to do the right thing and you're going to put your feet down and act like human beings who have a will, or you're going to keep answering to who you're answering to. And I just want to know, who are you answering to?
Stacy, we appreciate your passionate comments.
Don't qualify me by calling it passionate.
I'm sorry, we will not tolerate that kind of behavior. If you would like to express your comment in future with the tone that's respectful, then we would appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next hand. Deanna Tran, I've allowed your permissions to talk.
Hi, thanks. Stacy brought up something that I've been thinking about, and Melanie has also been thinking about. And if there are health effects in the children and community members down the line linked to the neglect in allowing this excavation and development to occur, despite dismissal of key environmental issues with toxin spillover and buried under soil, community backlash, as well as the developers' known corruption, lying, and trying to sway city organizations such as the Los Angeles City Planning Commission. Will DTSC, the Planning Commission, the developer, or all three take legal and public responsibility? Because if there are issues down the line and it's linked to this, I want to know who will take responsibility, because the children and the community members are ones who will suffer based off of this. And I do recall there being in one of the plans there being something relating to finances. That's my question. Hello?
Okay. I think that there were a lot of comments in there. So is there a specific question that we can address in there?
Yes, please. So say there are health issues, health effects in the children and community members down the line linked to this project. Who will take responsibility? Will it be the Los Angeles City Planning Commission, DTSC, the developer, or all three?
Okay. So in regards to the project site in general or the cleanup?
Relating to health issues relating to, I guess, either or.
Contaminants found on the property.
Yes, because DTSC would have to clear the development to the developers to, construct the project, right?
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you so much. So Javier, if you can pick up that question for us.
Yeah, I believe Ms. Tran had also questions about, city and elected officials involved in the approval process and siting of the project. And, as DTSC, we have no part in that. But, the investigation and the remedy and the implementation of the remedy is the responsibility of the DTSC. And DTSC is overseeing this remedy with the goal of cleaning the site up for its intended land use. And that is a standard of unrestricted as the initial goal for this project. And the different elements that are included in the cleanup strategy, have been successfully proven in the past. They're presumptive remedies that have been very effective. Obviously, if you excavate the source of contamination, that immediately reduces the contamination. However, because of the nature of this contaminant, that it volatilizes and spreads in the gas, that's why they're doing the vapor extraction. In addition to that, the concentrations that have been measured along the property lines indicate that they are protective and contained primarily to the well, let me just qualify that they are protective for the adjacent land use. And I believe that there are different land uses all around the property with different scenarios. One, to the east is residential and a school. To the north, former industrial property. To the east, to the west is the train track. And then
but
so on.
At the end of the day, who will take responsibility for the children community members who may be affected, who like down the line, if there are health issues linked to this project, who would take responsibility for that?
So again, the DTSC takes responsibility for cleaning up the site. We cannot, speak to past exposures, but we can prevent future exposures, current exposures, while we're involved in the project. And we'll continue to monitor, the various impacted media to ensure that is achieved, and continue to also communicate. We, if there are, concerns of health effects, there are avenues as well with different agencies involved, state, local, federal, that provide that support and help, concerned citizens identify whether it's something related to this, right? But I think there's no easy answer for the responsibility to the future, but it is our intent to eliminate any potential for exposure from this site through a successful implementation of this remedy.
Right, and I understand your concern and all. It's just like I, as the youth representative of Lincoln Heights, I am also concerned for the kids at Hillside who go to school right next to the project. And the school, and I went to that school too. So like, if they get sick based off of like any of this, whether now or in the future, I just want to know what avenues would they have and who would take responsibility for them getting sick because they're stuck here. But the development kind of, had to get permission from somewhere and all that stuff.
Correct. Yeah. But again, the DTSE is the state agency that will continue to be available to provide any information for any present, current, or future concerns. And so, but right now, those concentrations at that property line are protective of that current land use on the other side. And it's only going to improve as the remedy is implemented. Particularly, there's going to be substantial beneficial impacts after the excavation. And then it's only going to be further improved through the successful operation of the SVE. And then for future occupants of the property, once those goals are achieved and the other measures are implemented, it's going to continue to be protected. And as Marcia implemented, if necessary, there will be ongoing monitoring and operation and maintenance and other controls to prevent exposure and ensure the safety of the occupants on the site as well as the off-site occupants as well.
Thank you so much for your response, Javier. So I'm going to move on to Pay White. Please go ahead and express your comment.
Yes, thank you. I'm just actually echoing the previous comment, and we really like an answer. No long worded, empty comment. We want an actual answer. And what is the mechanism that you have in place or will put in place when and if any member of the community is sick because of this development?
Javier, I know there's no short answer to this, so but if you want to go ahead and take another stab.
If there are any health concerns, you should bring them to our attention now or into the future, and we will assist you in assessing if it's truly associated with the site, right? Again, the short answer is that we're doing the cleanup to prevent this into the future. That's the primary answer, and in the future, again, we can discuss the matter with you.
Thank you again, Javier. And I will move on to Elizabeth Reitz. And I apologize if I'm getting any of these pronunciations of everyone's names wrong. Elizabeth, if you unmute yourself, okay.
Hi there. I'm a business owner across the street from the development. And actually it's my husband, Bill, who is also my business partner. He's actually the one that wants to speak.
Yeah. There's been a lot of comments about the cleanup of the site. And we're new to the neighborhood on Avenue 34 at 166. But what I've heard from this meeting is there's a lot of concern about you're digging up a lot of contaminants. You're exposing the neighborhood to significant contamination. A lot of the conversation is about remediating the site and the use of the site. Well, how are you ensuring, right, outside of the vapor things, sounds sort of Star Warsy, are ensuring the safety of the community, the employers, the people who work literally across the street from this site through the course of this project as you expose the community to what's been essentially locked in the ground?
And children playing outside at the school nearby.
Thank you so much for your comment. I'm going to take a stab at this really quickly, and then any of the project team can go ahead and fill in. So the first line of defense is the air monitors when we're doing excavation, right? So that's going to tell us if there's any exceedances or any anything that is detected while we're doing the excavation, to determine if there's going to be any exposure that's moving away from the area that we're excavating. And so the first line of defense, that's going to be one of the first line of defense. Another line of defense is going to be the way that the soil is.
Can I ask a quick question? So the minute you notice that you have a status that goes into the red unsafe zone, how long does it take to shut down and remediate and protect the community from that alert?
So, and my understanding is that once there is an exceedance, work stops immediately. And please, anybody from my project team, correct me if I'm wrong. Once we see an exceedance, project work is stopped, and then until levels are safe again, then not until levels are safe again would work commence. So if anybody has,
do we not already anticipate an exceedance based on the environmental studies done by Fulcrum and California Environmental?
Hi, this is Javier again.
Thank you.
Let me just say, so the work to be done that involves the excavation involves multiple chemicals of concern, right? The first then is the VOCs, which is the PCE and the TCE, which are the solvents that are carcinogenic, odorous compounds that, and it's an excellent question that, and recognizing that by excavating this, you have a potential for having a release. And for that matter, the AQMD has very strict controls under various rules for both total dust as well as chemical laden dust and as well as VOC dust. There's at least 3 rules that play into this that have specific standards. In addition to that, at the point of excavation, there are dust control and vapor control measures that are spelled out in the RDIP, and in the RDIP meaning the remedial design implementation plan, and also in the soils management plan. So the team, the contractor conducting the excavation will be bound to this, and they will also have on top of that their health and safety plan. Then they will have on top of that a site safety officer monitoring the areas of being excavated. And oftentimes these excavations are done in very limited surface areas that are controlled, right? And so one thing is to also monitor with equipment immediately on there, but sometimes even the nose is more sensitive to this, right? So odors, that people detect. And then also, like Jessica was alluding to, the monitoring at the fence line, that is also for the purposes of the VOCs, and also the metals that are contaminated, or maybe the TPH, that will also be in place. And all of these have standards for reducing the amount or terminating the amount. For example, if there's high winds above 25 miles per hour, the site operations will shut down, right? If also there's complaints from the residents, right, that about that there are smells and stuff, also the communication of when this is going to take place. So if you see something, say something. There's going to be a phone that is going to be answered regularly if you do see something out there. So all of these control measures are common to these contaminants. Now, mind you, the toxicity of these contaminants, some of them have long chronic toxicity, some of them have shorter, but still a nuisance can be just as bothersome as a potential exposure. So this will be presented in our work notices that'll be sent out to the immediate area. It can also be presented in our future communications. It can also be posted on the site. So, but these measures will be in place for the excavation. And I apologize for the long-winded answer, but your question was a very good question and deserved a complete answer.
Thank you, Javier.
Yeah, it just, to me, it just sounds like, you know, you're going to dig up some nasty stuff, and the technology is not going to be in place to remediate that risk and its impact to either short-term impact or long-term impact to the community, which is why we're having these conversations and why people are so passionate about this and have been involved for so long.
I think it was Dr. Williams who spoke of his experience earlier, and with working with the Metro, and explained how he had dealt with a lot of contamination and come across whether it was methane or hydrogen sulfide, and was very well aware of the control methodologies that have existed for years, because you know, those contaminants are very common to the LA County area because of his historical oil fields. So these methods are in place, and we're well aware of them, and that's why, you know, the AQMD has the protections that it has. But it's a short-term controlled removal for, you know, long-term protectiveness, which is the goal.
Thank you,
Both
Javier.
short-term and long-term.
So I would like to check in with Brittany really quickly. Would you let us know if there are any questions from our Spanish call-in line? Thank you so much. And Marcia, maybe you can pull this one up. We have a question in the chat from Dr. Tom Williams. If you can give us that question so that we can respond to it.
It was a question about the stockpiling, so I just wanted to have some folks address that, as well as the haul routes, but there's several about the haul routes. So I'm going to put those forward to be answered live as well, because there's quite a few that I'm scrolling through and finding.
So haul routes and soil stockpiling?
Yeah.
So right, for those two questions, we're currently in the process of reviewing the remedial design implementation plan, which includes that information. So we're still reviewing that. We've received several of your comments regarding that, regarding the haul routes and the soil stockpiling. So, and I believe, Marcia, as you stated in your presentation, we are requiring the developer to not have trucks loaded with contamination along Avenue 34. And we are also requiring that no stockpiling occur along Avenue 34 or Pasadena Avenue. So if there's any follow-up to that from the project team that I missed, or that should also be answered in at this time.
No, that sounds right. That's okay.
Thank you, Luis. Okay. Marcia, are there other questions in the chat that are in relation to what you discussed during your presentation, or should we continue with raised hands?
Keep looking.
Okay, so I will move to Julia Vasquez. Sorry, it dropped off right when I clicked it. So Julia, if you would like to express your comment, please raise your hand again. Okay, thank you. Oh, what? Oh. Okay, please go ahead. You should be able to unmute at this time.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you can clarify. I live on Pasadena Avenue, 3 blocks from the site. I was born and raised here, but I don't have the traditional demographics of the neighborhood. I read the California Health and Safety Code with my lawyer hat on, as I am a lawyer. And I read the statute really carefully. And it noted for meaningful public participation. And I realized that a court would have to interpret that. But this does not seem meaningful to me. I appreciate the response in the chat that there were under 200 surveys collected. I want to note that as of the 2019 census, there are over 39,000, almost 40,000 residents of Lincoln Heights that responded to the census. This does not seem meaningful. I recognize that you're attempting to comply with a minimum standard here, but we're talking about people's health, lives, livelihood, equity. And I just find it very ingenuine that your agency is attempting to comply with the statute that can be interpreted by the courts differently. And so I do want to give an answer to the youth representative. I would encourage her to look at the litigation that was filed against your agency in Richmond, which is similar, in Richmond, California, which is similar to this case. And I highly encourage your agency to create opportunities for more meaningful participation, because it's not even, the survey responses are not even 1%. And I encourage you to seek out culturally competent experts and how to reach out to a community, because this is not meaningful.
Thank you for your comment.
We have one question in the Q&A feature about who the oversight team is. So I was hoping that Luis, maybe you could speak to who will be providing the on-site oversight during the cleanup.
Yeah, for the oversight, it would consist of myself, also Daniel Filo, who is the project geologist. If I'm not available, we have other staff available, such as my supervisor, Jose Diaz. Daniel Filo can also coordinate with other geologists, such as Maya Bachman, who has been involved in the project in the past. So we have various people that can provide the oversight during the implementation. And it's not just limited to us four. We can always obtain more additional help when people are not available, or we need additional help. So.
Okay.
And CY just pointed out that the IHs are also available, the industrial hygienists. We have several people available.
Thank you so much. I think we have one hand raised by someone who hasn't yet been able to speak. Because we're over time, we're going to ask Tom Marble to unmute and ask your question or share any thoughts, and then we'll be closing out the evening.
Oh, sure. I just want to, I guess it's already been raised on the chat section, and I think Sarita is also talking about the haul route, and you have all these protections for the toxic substances on the site, but what happens when it gets on a truck and goes down the street? Avenue 34 is filled with people, workers and people who live there. It's and well, Pasadena Avenue too. I mean, there must be some regulation about how to cover or treat the waste before it goes into a truck. And I'm wondering if that's the case.
Yeah, there indeed are. And Luis, can you talk more about the measures that go into place as trucks are exiting the property?
Well, the trucks, there's just like on the rest of the site, there will be dust suppression measures throughout the excavation work. So not only will the site itself, be sprayed, also while it's being loaded onto the back of the trucks. When the truck leaves, a lot of the trucks have these tarps that go over the can't think of over the truck itself, the where the soil is being loaded onto, or the material. And also a lot of work sites have what's known as rumble strips, and also the cleaning or making sure that there's no track out of any soil debris when the soil leaves the site, or when the truck leaves the site itself.
And additionally, soil trucks loaded with contaminated soil will not be traversing on Avenue 34. So that we mentioned earlier, and it bears repeating.
Thank you, Marcia. So right now I'd like to move really quickly into the public participation recap. Thank you so much, Elsa. On activities that we will, so we intermixed the public participation activities throughout the presentation and discuss them along the way in the process as they're seen in the process. So some of the activities that have occurred recently or will occur in future include the DTSC project team completing and distributing the response to comments. Again, this is available on the EnviroStore site, or you can email me directly. The proponent recently submitted the remedial design implementation plan. We are currently reviewing this document, but the draft is loaded onto the EnviroStore page. If you go to the EnviroStore page, you can sign up for the e-list. You can also email me directly to get signed into, get added to our emailing list that we use for distribution of things like upcoming work notices, or to notify when things are being loaded onto EnviroStore. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here we have my contact information as well as Luis's contact information. You can contact us throughout the entirety of this process, and we look forward to continuing to furthering engagement with you all. So thank you all for attending this evening and for the robust discussion that we were able to have. We appreciate your feedback and look forward to engaging you all. Good evening.